Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Someone was asking me, can we do a 10-degree downward tilt on a USG grinder? And I said, yeah, sure we could do a 10 degrees downward tilt on a USG grinder. There's no reason why we can't because it's got a slide-in vise. But if you look at the USG chart that actually comes with a USG grinder, you won't see anything on there that refers to 10 degrees downward tilt. What you will find in column B, so column A refers to the grinder that can tilt, which is a top plate angle. So that's the grinding wheel angle that comes into the tooth. So that's A. B is a sliding vise, and C is top plate. So when you look at the little grinder, you'll see A, B, and C. That's what it corresponds to. You'll also see a little tooth there that has, a bit hard to read, that's number 1, that's number 2, and that's number 3. So in these little check boxes, you'll see 1, 2, and 3 down the bottom. So that corresponds to that. And then you'll see 1, 2, and 3. So this is left, right, and this is for the rakers. So all on these bottom boxes, number 3 is all the raker settings. So don't get confused. So if we were to look, and still uses 40 degrees on virtually everything, except when we get to rapid hexa, which is down the bottom. RH is rapid hexa, and these are your tungsten carbide. But from there upwards, 40 degrees for everything. So you could virtually set and forget. The B scale refers to the vise, and if you have a look, you'll see -15 / +15. And that goes all the way down till we get to the same thing, right down to the bottom to the tungsten carbide and also down to the rapid hexa. What is that? And this scale here, you'll find out refers, there's a lot of, this is a top plate angle. So why on every chain except the tungsten carbide and the hexa is it -15 and +15? This scale is in millimeters. It is not in degrees. That's where a lot of people get confused. So if we zoom in there, hopefully you can see that. That's in millimeters. Now, what I wanted to draw your attention to was when we spoke about the -15 and the +15, that is what is referred to offset grinding. And by offset grinding means that if we zoom in and pull this wheel down and just set this up correctly, that we'll just get that right, that you'll see that the wheel, the ruler that I've inserted into the gap here, into the bar rail, where your chain sits in the bar rail, in that gap, I've inserted a steel ruler, which is quite straight. I've set the B scale on 0, and I pull this down into the grinding position, and it's right in the middle. But as that wheel gets smaller through grinding, we're going to have to go that way, offset. To give you an example, this wheel is 140 millimeters in diameter, and it's fine. By the time the wheel gets down to 130 millimeters in width, we're going to have to go 1 millimeter that way. By the time it gets down to 120 mils in width, we've got to go 2 mils that way. By the time it gets to the end of the life, 110 mil, we've got to go 3 mils that way. Now, to show you why you have to do that, is that you just have to look up there and say, oh, look, yeah, look at the center of the spindle. Look how far it is from the steel ruler. But as we bring the handle down, it gets closer to the steel ruler. The center line comes in alignment. And then by the time you get down to the bottom, it's in perfect alignment. And that's where you've got to keep it, in that alignment. Now, how does still get around it? Still get around it by offset grinding. And by offset grinding means that you move the vise to minus 15 or to positive 15, depends whether you're doing the left or the right hand tooth. That means that you go past the centre line and you'll never have any centre line issues as the wheel wears down because you're going 15 millimetres. Now, not to confuse you, I'm looking at, when we look at the left and the right tooth of a chain, it's viewed from the back of the grinder. I'm viewing from the front, so we need to go from round the back. So if you were to look at that USG chart, and it's got 1, 2, and 3, number 1 refers to a left-hand tooth. So that's what number 1 is. Number 2 is a right-hand tooth. So with a left-hand tooth, if you look at the USG chart under column B, it'll say that you've got to go minus 15 in that direction. For the right-hand tooth, you've got to go positive 15 millimetres in that direction. That is offset grinding. 15 millimetres is quite a fair amount from the centre line. And that's the way that that works. And that way you don't have to worry about that alignment that I was showing you. But if you've got an Oregon grinder, you can get on Oregon's website and they'll show you how to put a ruler in and do that with a Oregon style grinder. Now, the 10 degrees downward tilt. To do a 10 degrees downward tilt, it's offset grinding as well. But rather than cross over that way, which is what the USG grinder is doing with the negative and the positive, so they're going from one side to the other side. But when we do a 10 degrees downward tilt, and if I stand back here, this is the left tooth and this is the right tooth, viewing it from the back, we move outwards. We move away from the centre line when we do a 10 degrees downward tilt. And I'd probably give this about, on the scale that we've got here in millimetres, I'd probably go about 6 millimetres to this side, 6 millimetres to that side. So when we put a chain in, we'll do that now. This is just an old chain. And it's the opposite of an Oregon. So the left hand tooth is on the outside, the right hand tooth is on the inside. So if I was going to do a left hand tooth, I would loosen the vise and come over about 6 millimetres like that. If I was going to do a right hand tooth, which is this side, then I would push it 6 millimetres to the right side. Just remember that you've got to, whichever tooth you're doing, right or left, you've got to move the vise away from the centre line. So you move it that way for the left hand tooth, you move it that way for a right hand tooth. And that's it. That's all you've got to do. And you'll get your same tilting that you would get on an Oregon style grinder. Only one other point that I would make is that the grinding wheel on the Stihl USG grinder is only about 4.1 millimetres maximum. Make sure that this profile, that U shape on there, is the right shape. If you have the wrong shape on here, you will definitely get a different side plate angle. Now, normally what they're saying to you, if you follow the Stihl USG chart, even though that you set this head to 40 degrees, if the wheel's dressed correctly, you generally end up, if you look at the last column on a USG chart, it's going to tell you that you're going to end up with either a 60 or 70 or 75 degree angle. That's what you should end up with. And that's what the little icon up there means. That's the side plate angle. There it is there, 60 degrees, 75. So even though that you set this to 40 degrees here, you may set this to 40 degrees. Now, I hear some of you say, 40 degrees, wow, that sounds like that's a fairly aggressive angle on the head. still don't use 90 degrees reference point. On a Stihl USG grinder, vertical reference point is 0. So we're actually moving over to 40 degrees. On an Oregon grinder, you start at 90 degrees. If you were to move 40 degrees to that direction, it would be 50. So that's what it is. Now, typically on an Oregon grinder, a lot of times we move over from 90 into the 60 degree position. So that's 30 degree movement from vertical there. On a USG grinder, we start at 0 and we would move over to 30. So we've only moved 30. Everything is the opposite on a USG grinder. It's the same as the teeth here. On an Oregon grinder, you'll view the teeth from that way. So left and right is the other way around. So everything's a little bit different on a USG grinder. I actually prefer it this way. I'm used to it. Doesn't matter whether I use Oregon or whether I use Stihl. I'm used to both. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I do have a tooth, part of a chain that I ground up before, and I'll bring it over to the bench and we'll have a look at it over here, because I really want to show you what the Stihl did, how it works. And this was on the Oregon grinder, 10 degrees downward tilt. Not too bad, is it? Happy with that? This is on the Stihl. Now that's exactly the same settings. That's 40 degrees on scale A. The vise is positive 6 millimeters. And the top plate cutting angle, that's the angle on top there, that's 30 degrees. So just remember, that's your left-hand tooth. We moved it that way, positive 6 degrees. If it's a left-hand tooth on a Stihl USG grinder and you want 10 degrees downward tilt, move it that way. Just remember, the tooth move away from the wheel, not in towards it. The standard setting is move 15 millimeters in towards the wheel and past the wheel. So for a left-hand tooth, you'll move towards the wheel, past the wheel, you'll be 15 millimeters, off the center line. That's the way it works. Look, I hope that information helps. The Stihl USG grinder is a brilliant grinder. As I say, some of the settings are a reverse of the Oregon type grinder, so I hope that information helps. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.